Hi everyone, and welcome to Active Travel Cafe here on 9th of July. I am delighted to see you all today. My name is Roxanne. I'll be facilitating, and our wonderful guest speaker joining us today is Laura Laker, who I'm sure we have all heard of from her many wonderful journalistic achievements. But in particular, today, Laura will be talking to us about her new book, Potholes and Pavements. And I know we're all very excited to hear more about it and ask lots of questions. But before we get to Laura, we've got to wait just a little bit more, and we are going to get our news from our wonderful network. So if you have got some news that you'd like to share with the group, put your hand up and let's see what's going on around the country. Guy, you're up. What's your news from Bath?
Oh, hello. Yeah, so I rode a new part of the NCN today. So I'm going to big that up. That was part of the Route 33, the peer-to-peer route. I'm sorry if I've stolen anyone's thunder, anyone else on this call, but it opened literally a few days away. It's chopped off, I think, 4 miles from the NCN, as in it's reduced what was a huge detour by putting a new route over a sluice. And there was even some tarmac on the new section, so that was pretty exciting. But there were potholes elsewhere, so that was less exciting. But just really, with all the election and everything, I thought it was just nice to give a shout out to everyone. I know those schemes take so much work to deliver, and yeah, they add up, everyone around the country. So yeah, well done, guys. And that's it.
Brilliant. Love to start the day or the session with good news, and very timely for our guest speaker, I think, as well. Who's nodding? Brilliant. Ruth, your news.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, not good news, I'm afraid. So, sorry to bring the tone down, even where I am on holiday. It makes me furious that TfL are still designing things to improve the lot of driving and their tokenism for cycling. So, the A4, which people may or may not know, which comes from Heathrow Airport straight through to Hammersmith and into the centre of London, meets at a Hogarth roundabout in Chiswick, which has a flyover that was built temporarily in 1969 or something and is still there. And the A316, which is an absolutely horrible route, goes past a school, secondary school. So their proposal is to improve the driving experience, to make more space for driving. They're saying that they're putting in more space for walking, but they are talking that on every junction, and if anyone knows this roundabout, it's absolutely horrible, on putting ASLs on every arm. So you've got ASLs on an arm of a dual carriageway all the way from Wales into central London, and the A316, which comes from southwest Richmond. And I'm really incandescent with anger. You often see me angry, but this is even more angry because their other thing is that they're saying that there's a subway, which I used to live the other side of that subway, and to my shame, in the 80s, would drive to get from one side of Chiswick to the other rather than use that subway because it was so nasty and frightening. It's not much better. I do cycle through it, but pedestrians hate it because it's not big enough. They can't make it any bigger. There's a new development proposed, and what they've said is that they will fund or help fund separate cycle lane through a very inadequate subway with climbs at both ends, which would make it really horrible for anyone with children or disability or whatever, or even anyone like me who's fit and active. So it just makes me so angry that TfL, who I long support, and Sadiq Khan, who I support, have even come up with this scheme, and it's going to be such a long, hard battle. 8 years ago, they rebuilt the roundabout a bit and promised funding for cycling, and all they did was put in 8 cycle racks. So if anyone out there on this call has anything to do with it or can be involved in it, then please, 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 please help, because it just is so time consuming and tiring, and we shouldn't be having to go through this. So very quickly, sorry, Roxanne, I promise I'll be very quick on this second one. The other is, and we've all said this about consultations, so they're now consulting on another bit of Cycleway 9, which, as we all know, I think is fabulous. But they're consulting on the tiniest extension, which is going to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to consult, will take even more time, will allow even more people to be negative about it, will take even more of our transport, very talented engineers to have to help with designing it. And then it might go back to the drawing board and then so the fact that we're consulting on every few hundred meters, it seems at the moment, even with a very positive council, is just so not cost effective and doesn't help at all. But the A316 and the A4, what is really needed is Southwest trains need to get back the trains they had pre-COVID, because a lot of people would use those trains instead of driving the A316 and the A4.
Now,
Sorry.
Help Ruth. I'm sure Ruth can put some contact details in the chat. But I definitely hear your challenges, and I think we feel them all around the country, the tediousness of consultation on small cycling schemes, but roads seem to get built without a second thought. Mark, your news.
Thank you.
Well, it's news from tomorrow, and if Tina is here from Stevenage, I don't want to steal her thunder.
Tina,
so is she?
Need
is she
your
here?
Now?
Well, no, because she spoke last time, so she was great. So anyway, I'll be in Stevenage tomorrow morning with a certain Mr. Deegan launching the North Road, that's the Stevenage Town Centre to Stevenage Hospital route, which is a bit of the NCN going through the middle of Stevenage, with all the history of the Stevenage cycleways and so on. It'll be quite interesting to see what they're doing for new things rather than trying to retrofit old stuff. So there'll be some photos of it, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And yes, I'm sure we'll love to have a report after the event. John, your news.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick one. Today I was interviewed by ITV Anglia News. They picked up on a story of a cyclist who was pushed off their bicycle by a passenger in a car a couple of weeks ago near Reading. Obviously a very rare occurrence, so I did try to turn this into a good news story to talk about the joys of cycling. So that was all, really. It might be on local Anglia News later this week.
Thanks, John. Thanks, and for keeping up the good messaging battle. Yep. H, your news, please.
Well, just actually an update, because last week everybody reacted about cycles on coaches. You can actually take your bikes on National Express coach services. In 1996, I started work on this with National Express and Cycling UK, but we still have not got reservable spaces. They won't guarantee to carry it. And that's a campaign. We've got there with Scottish City Link. We've got there with Megabus. So I now want to get National Express to do reservable bike spaces on their coach services. And you can fit a tandem on those coaches quite easily. So it's a big opening that sort of turns around the rail issue.
Thank you, H. Helpful. I have taken my bike on the bus from Cambridge to Oxford, but that's my experience. Okay, David, your news.
I just wanted to follow on from John Morris, because the same thing's happening in Birmingham in the West Midlands. What ITV do is they have a national story, and this one's fed by Cycling UK, saying part of their strategy is sort of to improve the image of cyclists, you know. And they want to talk to me about culture wars and cycling tomorrow. So, John, I'll put my email on the chat, and perhaps you could tell me how you got on, because they were going to come around today, but it's pouring with rain and they don't film in the rain. The line I was going to take is I'm not really interested in culture wars. Culture should be about creative stuff, music and art, and war is about killing people. And in Birmingham, we're just killing people on the roads. Another cyclist was killed by a lorry driver this morning. So that's what we're concerned about: safer streets on the roads, not culture war. Many of us drive as well, and I get fed up with, I'll say it more rationally tomorrow, with social media and particularly newspapers fanning culture wars, encouraging things like the cutting down of speed cameras or ULEZ cameras. So I'll try and put it like that, but I'll also emphasize that cycling is really quite enjoyable. But John, if you could just give me a bit of feedback. It'd be useful to know what questions they're using. I welcome that. I'll put my email in the chat. Thank you.
So maybe we should be looking at in all regions of the country for ITV reaching out. Maybe they've all been told this is
it's a strategy of theirs. Apparently, it's a cheaper way of doing news.
Yeah. Well,
but they do have a camera crew. Last time I was on Midlands Today, my wife had to film me riding up the road on the bike talking about asthma, which is quite a trick if you can do
it. Okay, Roger, your news. Roger, you're on mute.
Just trying to unmute, succeeded at last. Yes, so I just, scanning the general election results, noting a few new MPs who have an interest in cycling. First up, Ollie Glover. Some people here may remember him. About 12 years ago, he was the chair of the Greater Manchester Cycling Campaign. He's just been elected as a Lib Dem MP for Didcot and Wantage. So nice one, Ollie. Some of us will remember him. I certainly do. And second is Andy McNay, who's just been elected as a Labour MP for Rossendale and Darwin, and he is a trustee of Cycling UK. I don't know whether my ex-colleagues at Cycling UK have picked up any others, but a third one appeared in a tweet that was retweeted by Louise Haigh, Transport Secretary, and she retweeted a photo of Hamish Falconer, the new Labour MP for Lincoln, boarding a train for his first journey into London to go to Parliament, boarding one of the terrible East Coast express trains with his bike. Now, he's the son of Charlie Faulkner, one of Tony Blair's ministers, and he'll probably be more interested in foreign policy because he's worked in the Foreign Office. But there he was, tweeted boarding his bike, boarding his train with a bike, retweeted by Louise Haigh, who will be introducing legislation. Is expected to introduce legislation on reconfiguring our rail system. An opportunity to push for bikes on trains, and we now know a new MP who obviously uses his bike on a terrible East Coast mainline train. I'd be interested to know if anybody else has clocked anyone else who is known to be cycle friendly, apart from the obvious point that that we can expect all four new green MPs to be well into cycling.
Roger,
thank you for the news about the Kensington MP. Thank you.
Yeah, and Roger, I've popped in Cambridgeshire as well. There'll be some worth looking at there.
Excellent.
Yeah, we can tell. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roger, and thank you so much for keeping out. I expect we'll be getting lots of news for you as the new government starts rolling out various policies and statements and so on. So we are very, very lucky to have you here keeping us informed. Thank you. Cameron, your news, and then I think that's it for the news section.
Yeah, just a small bit of news back to the NCN. There's a section of Route 68 between Buxton and Whaley Bridge in Derbyshire that Derbyshire County Council have now resurfaced because previously it was just a boulder fest. So that's now been resurfaced. Unfortunately, it's open to all traffic, but I've ridden it a couple of times recently, and there's not much traffic, well, I've not seen any motor traffic using it. Unfortunately, the rest of the route, which is being paid for as part of the Safer Roads Fund, into Buxton, will be shared pavements, basically. So we'll wait to see what that's like, but it's a small improvement, and a small improvement on the NCN, I guess.
Brilliant. Well, speaking of the NCN, shall we move on to our guest speaker, Laura, as introduced earlier, has a new book called Potholes and Pavements. And actually, this book explains a lot about Laura's journey, not just on the National Cycle Network, but how you came to be one of our favorite cycling journalists and writers, I suppose. But Laura, I will let you take it from here. The floor is yours. Tell us what you've been up to.
Thank you. I've got a presentation.
Wonderful. Let me get...
if that's of interest. It's quite nice to have pictures, isn't it?
I am so glad to hear that you've got them. I hope we get a pink e-bike.
Okay, let's do this. That fella. Oh yeah, the e-bike, yes. do that. Do that. Can you see it?
There it is.
There I am. Okay. Oh yeah, I've got loads of clicky things. So as many of you will know, I've been at this for a while, writing about cycling and about the NCN and all of the funding and frustrations and weird bits of steps with a bollard on it that make up all of our cycle routes in the UK. I wanted to write this book because I know that, you know, I care about this topic very deeply, and like most of us in the room will know how kind of powerful it can be as a tool to make our places better, make our lives better. And I know that 2/3 to 4/5 of people want to cycle more, and I hope that it will appeal to people. The kind of travel writing bit will bring them in, and they'll stay for the nerdy bits about why National Highways is spending so much on roads and so little on cycling. So yeah, I set off on a kind of an odyssey around the UK, using the NCN as a bit of a proxy for UK cycle routes. I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. That thing on the bottom right, I'm not sure if you can see it. Our little faces might be in the way for some people, but that kind of bit of sandy thing with some broken pipes is actually part of the NCN in Cornwall, one of the worst bits, but there are also some amazing bits. The bit above it is in South Wales near Llanelli, which is a delightful kind of Dutch style wide smooth route with lots of signs saying how many miles it is to the next place, and so that was delightful. And then I interviewed people along the way. So I spoke to Chris Boardman, obviously. I spoke to Isabel Clement. I spoke to Ned Bolting, had a bit of a philosophical discussion about cycling with him. And then I spoke to David Tristan in Wales, who's kind of Chris Boardman's, or was Chris Boardman's equivalent in Wales. And then, yeah, I kind of wanted it to read nicely. So I did lots of travel writing and spent ages like trying to make it, you know, as accessible as possible for people. And then I did a manifesto at the end, on the encouragement of my editor, which, yeah, I had to consult lots of people about, because it's quite a scary thing to do. Like, this is what needs to be done. It's easy to criticize, but it's harder to say, actually, you know, this is what we need to do, not do. So these are some of the fun bits I saw. Love crossing the Severn Bridge on that funny little bit of cycle path next to the motorway. It always feels like a big adventure. I went to the Highlands of Scotland. I went to Cornwall, did Hadrian Cycleway, did the Transpennine Trail. That bridge on the bottom right is in Glasgow. Cost, I think, £14 million-ish. And it's connecting these three communities across a T-junction of a canal, and it's just, you know, proper cycling infrastructure, like really inspiring stuff, because previously there's just a tiny little tunnel that people could get through, and that was about it. I ended up in the NCN history. I didn't intend to be, but then I just found it so fascinating, and the characters involved. And we heard earlier about NCN 33 in Somerset. That picture on the bottom right is actually Tuts Hill Sluices, the bit that's just been finished, and that's John Grimshaw, I think in the late 70s, lifting his bike over that section in the recognition that this is something that needs to be fixed. So we're talking about like almost 50 or possibly 50 years later, which, you know, we talk about how long it takes to do stuff. John has literally been working on stuff for 5 decades. So yeah, so that's the Bristol to Bath railway path in the middle, and that's all kind of landscaped and full of trees and stuff now, but they had kids and families and almost no money. And I like this leaflet which someone sent me at the bottom left, which was Cycle Bag before it was Sustrans, which is channel your calf and leg energy into Bristol Action or Bicycle Action Group, which is like, it's just slightly less catchy than Sustrans. But yeah, so they kind of had the same goals and the same aims that we do today, and recognize the same problems that we have today. So yeah, in some ways nothing has changed, but in other ways a lot has changed. So I'm not keeping track on time. I'm being a very bad speaker. But anyway, hopefully that's okay.
You've got plenty of time today. You are our 1 star of the evening. So
okay, I shouldn't rush through it too much. I just don't want to. Yeah. Okay, good. So one thing I found amazing that we don't often get kind of data on cycle routes and how well used they are. So I fished around, and obviously Cycleway 3 in London is a massive one, Bristol to Bath railway path. And, you know, it's like, it's just incredible when you build this stuff, how many people use it, but we don't talk about it. And I really wanted to highlight just how popular this stuff is, because Sustrans often doesn't have this money for the kind of observation, and so it just gets, the story isn't told, and so this stuff gets built, and it's like, well, is it really doing us any good? There's a story that kind of goes around in Cornwall every couple of years about the top 10 tourist attractions, and the camel trail somehow gets left out, even though it's the second top tourist attraction in the whole of Cornwall, but second only to the Eden Project. It gets 500,000 visitors a year, and I think that's old data as well. So yeah, we've got some of the famous ones here. But we've also got, and I got this number from the local council, this Shepton Mallet path, which is literally a 300-yard path that goes from the council offices to I guess, like a kind of industrial estate, but it ends up connecting housing to shops in this very small town of about 10,000 people. And I went to the opening because I became quite invested in Shepton Mallet cycle routes, because John's still building cycle routes, so I go and volunteer now every year on his work camp in September. It's kind of fun. You get to build stone walls and, I don't know, get muddy and stuff and camp. Nice. So anyway, so yeah, a year later, they had a digital counter. They have calculated 104,000 trips in a town of 10,000 people. So before, people had to, and this actually was the first tunnel under bridge kind of structure that National Highways allowed a cycling route to go through. So they've been filling in all of these bridges with concrete. So they've changed their policy, and this was the first route. So I just thought that was amazing. And it just goes to show, even in a very small Somerset town, people do want to walk and cycle. So yeah, I think that's really important. And in the book, I talk about the example of Copenhagen in Denmark, and just the huge kind of investment that they have made in cycle routes. And so they cost around 300 million euros, 530 miles of cycle superhighway, which became one of the most profitable. I read my own audiobook, believe it or not, infrastructure investments in Denmark. Yeah, so I think the initial was 300 million, and then and then I'm covering up my own thing with my picture. Yeah, so yeah, 765 million cost benefit gain, so massive amounts of money coming back in. And it was a kind of national project with lots of different municipalities, which is something I don't think we really do here. I think it's happened in the West Midlands with the HS2 cycleway section that Andy Street and Adam Tranter put together before they got elected out. But yeah, it's not something that we tend to do that well in the UK, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, 6 million new cycle trips a year and 1 million fewer car trips. People are cycling 7.5 miles. It's longer than you think, I guess. And half of users are women because it's safe. 14% previously drove. And I like to contrast this with the UK. I mean, I say I like to, it's not like a happy story, really. So in the UK, we've got this chap in the middle, Richard Ackroyd, who used to be the mayor of Frome. He has been engaged for the last 20 years on building what's known as the Frome Missing Link, which is about 3 miles of path linking the Collier's Way to the centre of Frome. It's like the one bit of flat land in a place where the hills are like this, no joke. And yeah, and it's on an old railway trail, but he and some local volunteers have been having to put together the land, kind of assembling the land themselves, negotiating, because it was too hard for even Sustrans to do. But yeah, he's still smiling after 20 years of effort. He's pointing towards a bit of disjointed path that he likes to call the Coal Ash Triangle. It just literally sits in the field with mud on either side, and you can't really cycle to it. But it's there because they had to get it built before the permissions ran out. So yeah, bit by bit, he and the others are kind of piecing together bits of this route. Top left is John Grimshaw at the very first bit of the National Cycle Network by Bitton Station on the Bristol and Bath Railway Path. And then bottom left is Xavier Bryce and some amazing volunteers on the Transpennine Trail. And yeah, just do the most wonderful job keeping the path clear and full of kind of artwork and interest and amazing people. And then I like to show this graph, which compares National Highways budget for 5 years with the NCN budget. You may or may not be able to see the tiny blue line for the NCN, but I think when you put them side by side and think about the return on investment, given many of the projects of National Highways, about 16 million of them are actually going to lose us money. So 90p or so return on our pound of investment. So yeah, it's all kind of the wrong way around. Yeah, and so I talk about that in the book. I got quite angry with national highways, actually. It was quite a frustrating part of the journey. I was like, how can this be true? But it is true. So these are they're some of the bad bits, which you'll be familiar with. Bollards, weird crossings. That's the shrub on the bottom left for those of you who've read the book and are interested in the little shrub that I grew from a cutting. Carried that across Cornwall on the pink e-bike, which is in the middle. Bodmin Station. Yeah, it's probably familiar to you. So yeah, my point of the book really is that the NCN's wonderful. The people who make it are wonderful. It's got a great story, but it's incredibly inconsistent. You can see the growth in miles over time, and you can see that it's kind of plateaued as of about 10, 15 years ago. The discrepancy between road and rail and cycling. And yeah, and then I've got a manifesto. So I make the case that it really needs to be properly funded, properly planned, long-term funding. It's the story that we all know. But I try and make it fun so that people keep reading and care about it. And so these are some of the fun bits. Nice signs, nice paths, sunny weather. Cycling in 2022 was delightful. It was basically sunny the whole year. Bad for the plants, but good for the bike. And yeah, new bits of path, amazing little bridges, and some more of that basically. That's Ed, oh God, what's his surname? I've got a terrible memory for names. The guy down Plowden, thank you, Mark. The Oracle of Mark Strong. Yeah, Ed Plowden, who's now Green Councillor for Bristol, in charge of transport. So, and he worked for Sustrans. He was the guy kind of removing the barriers and making the NCN accessible. Before that, he was in charge of putting in barriers to stop motorbikes kind of from getting into parks and green spaces in Bristol. So that's how things change over time. Yeah, so I didn't want to go on too long. So that's my whistle-stop tour of my book. And that's basically it. Hopefully I didn't go on too long. I've got no idea how long I was going, sorry.
No, you were absolutely fine, Laura. We've got plenty of time, and I think that's great because I think you'll have lots and lots of questions. So thank you so much for coming and sharing just some highlights of your journey, which I know we're all delighted to hear. So the questions are going to start rolling in without a doubt. I will start with Andrew. Question: the graph of the number or the amount of spending on the NCN versus the lots and lots of spending by national highways. Is that for England only, or has Scotland spent some more money on the NCN?
That's a good question. I can't remember actually.
We'll find out, won't we?
I'm going to find out.
Yeah, brilliant. We've got some fans. I can already see. I can see a few people in the crowd who I already know have read your book. Someone's already read it twice, Laura.
What? Twice?
Yes.
Oh, that's so nice.
And actually my colleague's planning to read it twice. Once for enjoyment, the second time to go and get all the notes and the figures and use them in our campaigning. So it's an absolute asset to have. I'm not getting questions. I'm just getting lots of praise and positive reviews of the book. I can just sit here and flex to Laura all day, or I'll start asking my own questions. Okay, Adam's got a hand up. Adam, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, the one that I'm kind of working with the Canal and River Trust or fighting against them, try and get the surfaces up to a wheelchair-friendly standard. And I'm thinking the same problem probably exists inside the NCN. And also National Trust are now looking at their pathways and making them inclusive and accessible. Do you see a narrative now under the current administration where we see these kind of horrible bound, although they're not horrible, but bound gravel services which don't work for people, for a lot of people, becoming something that goes away and we get more money coming in? Or do you see it just carrying on as is?
When you say administration, who do you mean, sorry?
Labour.
Oh God, I've got no idea. I don't think they know yet. I wouldn't have thought they know yet about surfaces for cycle paths. But we do have the design guidance, which says that it should be a sealed path. And I kind of hammer this point home through Isabel. Well, Isabel Clement hammers this point home, the importance of a sealed path. I think I know that some of the paths that John builds are kind of I guess, limestone dust because it's cheaper, with the idea that it will be kind of improved as time goes along, which is far from ideal. But I guess when you're working with no money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so no, I've no idea. But I mean, I think we do have the design standards and the funding is contingent on those standards being met. So I think if you're building a path that's government funded, then it probably needs to be. But where it comes to like heritage place spaces, there might be an argument that they might accept, I don't know, or in terms of canal towpaths, I'm not sure.
By the way, I'm not saying that towpaths are cycling infrastructure. They're not. Yeah, NCN, although NCN does go along many of them.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I'm just saying that more that the accessibility of these spaces is, really is quite limiting.
Yeah, and then they've got those weird paving things and they're too narrow. Yeah, they're not accessible, are they? Yeah.
And some of the, particularly on the Monmouthshire Canal, some of the motorbike things they put in have ripped apart my bike. Just going through them. But anyway, yes, I'll shut up now.
No, thank you, Adam. I think there are so many issues with accessibility, not just surfaces, the barriers, and finding a map, planning your route. We're getting there. But I actually, well, a bit of what I was thinking during your talk, Laura, and following on from Adam's question is thinking of writing a blog or something, which is a reading list for new MPs. So, you know, recommending or even sending MPs, especially new ones, some books to read to help them understand some of the challenges. So Potholes and Pavements is on the list, but perhaps in the chat we could put a couple of other recommendations of what we might put to our new MPs.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, and Laura, maybe we could even get you to dedicate something to our MP. Ruth, what's your question?
Hi, Laura. I'm ashamed to say I haven't read it yet, but I will. But you were on an amazing podcast with someone who I really can't remember, but you were fantastic. You should remember this podcast because he started by being quite antagonistic, but ended up loving you because you were so brilliant. Two questions really is one, did you do any research on compulsory purchase orders, because that is the way they do it in the Netherlands, and the 10-mile Ripley Greenway, which is absolutely fabulous, took 10 years of negotiating with landowners to even try and get it through, and it's very successful. And the other is about how police, and I've said this before on here, and I know people have got the correct terminology for it because I always forget it, but the police demand certain design standards to help with their policing. So it's policing by design rather than them actually having to do something to keep motorbikes out. I just wondered if you came across that anyway.
Yeah, so compulsory purchase, thank you, Ruth. Compulsory purchase became a bit of an obsession of mine because we do it for roads, we just don't seem to do it for cycle routes. The A27 route that National Highways delivered in East, I always forget if it's East or West Sussex, between Lewes and Polegate, they would have used CPO, I'm sure, for some of those bits and had no problem with that. But I think typically councils don't. And I don't know, I imagine if government guidance was a bit kind of more supportive, that they would take the risk, or if we had a kind of coordinating body that, like National Highways, that could, I don't know, help to deliver that as strategic infrastructure. But there is in my kind of obsession with the Shepton Mallet area is because the Mendips Council they closed down, they got absorbed into a larger council. But before they closed, they got John Grimshaw on board and he gave them a load of advice, and they just sort of rolled out loads of cycling routes as part of this Somerset Circle, which will one day be. But they started at least kind of having the option of compulsory purchase. And I think that's quite unusual. But it's down to the individual council, basically, unless nationally there is some kind of leadership on, like, this is a strategic route that we need to deliver. So it's, I don't know, it kind of ends up being on a bit of a case-by-case basis. So yeah, I think we need to use it more because it is a powerful negotiating tool, because otherwise, like you say, you get these groups that end up for 10, 20 plus years, including Sustrans, you have to negotiate, not upset anyone, and nothing ever gets built. But yeah, I think the way that Mendips, or former Mendips, approached it was, you know, we're building a route from A to B. How do we do it so we don't upset, you know, how can we do it to landowners, talking to landowners. How can we do it so that you can still carry on farming or, you know, doing whatever you need to do and make it as least disruptive as possible. I'm secure by design. I don't know. I mean, I saw something from Gloucestershire, I think this week. There was an article and the police had said something about benches. Mark was shaking his head during that. But I don't know. I don't know why, but Mark Strong.
I was going to
Just
ask
on
a question,
benches.
but
Sorry,
it's...
no. Well, I will just say on benches. Chiswick police made them remove a bench because kids congregated round it. I mean, it's awful. But thank you. Sorry, I'll butt
Yeah.
out.
We
Oh,
have that where I live as
I can
well.
beat that one, Ruth. We had to remove a bench on the Cuckoo Trail because kids were having sex on it. So there you go. I did want to ask Laura a question, but only if that's all right if I'm next.
Well,
I would also want to come back.
So quick question.
Right, so the secure by design, it's changed. It's not anti-cycling anymore. Any police officer that uses it to oppose active travel is using an out-of-date version of it, which is entirely possible because they probably haven't read the up-to-date version. The up-to-date version says the more people that walk or cycle, the better it is for personals and security. And we want people to walk and cycle, and it's really good. But that doesn't stop people who've been in their job for 30 years not reading the new guidance. My question to Laura, and thank you for capturing me in the quote, which is behind my screen. Once I start talking, I don't stop, so I'll try to stop. The question is, how much research did you do that you didn't use, and how long would the book have been if you had written everything you wanted to write? And where is it all? And will you write a sequel?
Oh God, yeah, I did a lot of. I went down a few rabbit holes actually, and thank goodness for editors is what I'll say, because my editor was amazing and she really made me cut it down. Some of the travel writing, it ended up, she's like, this is not an AA guide, Laura, because I was like, and then I went left. It wasn't quite that bad, but it was almost that bad. And yeah, and I really needed an editor. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff actually that I didn't use. A lot of waffly stuff. I had a whole document called Train Complaining, which no one needed to read, but I needed to write apparently. So yeah, the train bit got condensed down to a readable moan that would be bearable for readers. Yeah, I don't know. I like to write another one. I quite enjoyed it actually, and but I don't know what about. I don't know if there's an appetite for the offcuts of Potholes and Pavements, but yeah, the research bit was the scary bit because I'm like, I don't even know like how to reduce this down. It just kind of happens bit by bit by bit. It's like chiseling away at something and it becomes an object in the end.
Is that why I didn't get quoted, Laura? Was I cut out?
Yeah, I'm sorry, because it was so complicated in Cambridge. Because I talked to you and I talked to Jim Chisholm about the Chisholm Trail and the guided busway, and it was really interesting, but it was so complicated what's happening there that it just wasn't possible. Because I've learned once you introduce a topic, people have to be able to understand the whole thing, or it's just like, why are you mentioning it? So everything has to have a purpose. So yeah, it just wouldn't have been possible without and I didn't really understand it all either, and it just sounds hellishly complicated.
To get to grips with it, and it's only been my job for a decade.
Yeah.
Right, so
hats off to you though for doing it, because I sort of got an insight into just how complicated what you do is. So
thank you. Well, speaking of editing, Ailey's question is, what did you have to miss out and for what reason? I think this is editing your journey. So what sections would you have liked to have explored and you weren't able to?
Is this kind of, I wonder if this is like physically, like,
I think
yeah,
parts of the NCN.
That's how I read it. Okay, yeah. So the plan was to start from London and to go clockwise around the country, and keep the sea on the left. But I didn't really think it through because there's a lot of coastline in the UK. So after doing the southeast coast and getting to Brighton, I realised, oh my God, I'm going to have to get a move on here. So yeah, so I kind of went to Cornwall after that, and then Somerset, and then South Wales. I did North Wales at a different point. Then I went to Scotland, and then I came back from Scotland and realised I should have gone to Northern Ireland from Glasgow and didn't. And then I kind of ran out of time and money. I spent like £1,000 on train travel out of my advance. And then I didn't really do the Northeast, I'm ashamed to say, or much of East of England.
Well, there's your second book, isn't it?
I know. Yeah, it's a bit of a, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were bits that I would have liked to have done more, but yeah, I had to work as well and keep the money rolling in. And so yes, I think I got a good sense of what the general problems are, even if I didn't see it all. But I think probably I didn't need to see everything to understand the sort of bigger picture. But yeah, I was supposed to do the Way of the Roses last weekend just gone, but I had COVID a couple of weeks ago, so I'm still really tired. So I have to put that off for another time.
Yeah. Okay. Quick point of detail. Roger, always right there in the detail, so bear with me. You cited a figure from Denmark where 300 million euros had delivered 530 miles of cycle facility, so an average of 566k euros or per mile. What was that a figure purely for Copenhagen, so urban cycle facilities, or for Danish cycle facilities?
Ooh, I'll seek out the reference for that. Where did I get him from? Yeah, because I'm trying to think where I got that from. There was a case study in a document, and I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
Sorry, Roger.
Leave that. Roger, you can follow up. Robin's question. Scotland and Wales now spend significantly more per head than England on cycling infrastructure. Did you notice any effect? And I'm worried if that beautiful Glasgow bridge is probably already an example.
Sorry, I just remember which report that came from. What was the question again?
Can you tell that more money is being spent in Scotland and Wales than England?
It's hard to say, really. It is a bit of a weird one, because in Glasgow and in Cardiff you can see it, but then there's the South Wales coast, that Llanelli route, that little bit, but that was a kind of millennium route. I think it was part of a Millennium Park opened by Queen Elizabeth, and the cycle route was just part of the general rehabilitation of the industrial kind of land. So you see stuff like that, and then there's a really nice route through the Cairngorms, which is very well surfaced, although narrow. So I guess some of it would have gone on that because it looked quite new. So yeah, I guess you get bits and bobs, but like in Wales, when I was speaking to David Tristan, who's in charge of, he was like part of the kind of body that was dishing out funding, taking proposals and deciding which ones got which. It was like 10 million pounds on a bridge that was crossing like over the railway station in Newport, which is now finished, like a walking and cycling bridge, which is really important, but it's just like one thing. So I think it's probably too early in the process to say there'll be lots of these important but small things. And then the Stockingfield Bridge in Glasgow is like 14 million pounds. So even though there's a lot of money going around, I guess it's going on capacity building, small but important bridgey things. And so yeah, you get pockets, but I guess it's that long-term picture before you're going to start seeing a kind of yeah
Brilliant. I can see you, Guy. I've got a few more coming through on the chat. So from Lucy, did you come across much conflict between cycling and walking on the NCN, and do you think there is an argument for separating the two? I'm going to be really controversial and add on to the end of this. Sustrans started as a cycling charity. Should they be more focused on cycling, or are they doing the right thing as sort of representing cycling and walking?
So actually, like on the off-road bits of NCN, there's more walking trips than there are cycling trips. And I think those rural paths especially, are really important for walking. And, if you've got a kid who is learning to cycle and you can walk with them, or if you are in a mobility scooter and you're like walking pace with family, I think those paths are really important, kind of accessibility, give access to the country for everyone. And that includes people on foot. So I think they're doing the right thing, but I think where it becomes a problem is where you get the density of users, and then it becomes a problem. But I think in very rural areas, sharing a 3-meter path isn't generally an issue. It's just where it gets busy. And did I answer both those questions?
So Laura, then should we rename it from the National Cycling Network if it's about walking as well?
That's what Sustrans is asking at the moment, actually. They're having a bit of a moment and considering whether it needs rebranding. And Xavier's asked me this, but I don't know. I mean, it's got kind of a good brand at the moment, even though it doesn't describe everything that it does. And now there's increasingly horse riders, which I don't think should be sharing with cyclists or necessarily pedestrians. I don't think most people know how to interact with And I get quite nervous around horses just because I know what they can do. And I just don't think we should be sharing paths with them. The speeds, they're so easily spooked. I think they need separate, dedicated, nice soft. But then we just don't have the investment in routes. So you can understand that they don't want to be left out when there's a new path going in. So yeah, and they're victims of road danger as well. Sorry to keep going, but they're kind of heavily impacted by dangerous driving and busy roads. And yeah, we don't really hear about it very much.
Yeah, and surfaces are different. Horse riders don't want tarmac, so that's a real thing. But if we're converting bridleways into National Cycle Network routes as well, we have other challenges. I have an idea for a name. I'm going to get in touch with Xavier and suggest it.
Do you?
I do. Guy, would you like to ask your question?
Hello. CPOs. Yeah, it was interesting that coming up in the book, because locally CPOs were very much, we were told, just that it can't happen. Too expensive, too much officer time, forget about it. And what we've noticed in the last year or so is the successful local authorities around us are using CPOs. They've found a way to make them not too expensive and not too much officer time. And actually, even just the threat of a CPO, and I think that goes back to what you were saying, Laura, it just, the threat that this is serious, we're serious, we are going to build this, that's enough for a lot of landowners to cooperate rather than be forced. So that was maybe an advocate's point. And then my question was, I know in the book you mentioned somewhere particular, I can't remember what it's called, it's like the horrible alleyway or the hell.
The atmospheric alleyway.
Oh yeah.
Which is reopened to business, by the way. So if you're in Gravesend, check it out.
So that sort of touched on, maybe, I don't know if social safety is the right phrase, but the feeling safe as opposed to be exposed to the danger of road vehicles. So I was wondering, did you notice particular features on your travels of routes that made you feel safe, as well as the bits that made you feel unsafe? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the bits, I think as a woman kind of traveling on my own, I think the bits that make me feel unsafe are the bits where you get the kind of chicane and you have to stop and waddle. I found myself in Cardiff, it wasn't a cycle route, but I was just trying to find a route that avoided this terrible main road. Yeah, so I think those barriers are kind of like, when you stop is when you feel vulnerable for me. I think the unlit, isolated paths obviously are not safe, even if they are lit sometimes. I think that kind of the eyes on the street that Jane Jacobs talks about, just having a variety of people around a path. And obviously lack of traffic.
How did you feel about unlit paths where lighting's very difficult to provide? So even Bristol Bath, that's unlit for the majority of the interurban parts. And how did that affect your ability to use it or not?
Yeah, I guess the feeling's the same, whatever the reason for it being feeling dangerous. It's like you feel the same. But I think they just shouldn't be part of the network. If you can't make them feel safe, they shouldn't be part of the core network, or at least you should have a separate alternative. There's a one in London that goes past Millwall. It's not Millwall, Millwall. That's really dangerous at night, and people get mugged there. But now there's a route that goes via Rotherhithe, which is on the main road, which is like a separate path. So I think as long as you've got alternatives, you can use like the nice like green route when it feels safe, and then have an alternative when it doesn't. But yeah.
Thanks, Laura. It's interesting. I've just come back from some solo cycling in the Netherlands, Belgium, and the safety I feel there, and things the cycling I do there is just so different to what I would choose to do in the UK. Safety.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I hadn't quite thought through the social safety aspect of that, but it is part of that almost subconscious decision making. So yeah. So we want to make it better. You mentioned work camps, and John asks, could you say a little bit more about these camps and volunteer work? How could we find out more and get involved?
If you email greenwaysandcycleroutes@gmail.com, Caroline won't mind. Yeah, it's like usually a small thing, and then but I don't know. I did warn them that probably oh, I think I did a direct message instead of a second. I'll do it again. So this year it is in Shepton Mallet again. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? 7th to the 14th of September. It's quite fun because yeah, you get to build stuff. I did some helped to put some new stones on a viaduct that's now got tarmac on it, but finishes at a gate where the next landowner hasn't yet agreed to have a path. But the viaduct's open for business. And yeah, so that happens every year. It's quite a small group. At the moment, they cook food for everyone every night, but I don't know at what point that becomes unviable. But anyway, they seem to be doing it for now. Big curry, not really nice curries last year.
Brilliant. And I have a feeling you've just suggested a new speaker for us as well. Someone could come and talk a little bit more about how they do this. That would be great.
Caroline Levitt's amazing.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, she's been involved with like Sustrans, the Millennium Bid forever, and she really understands the nuts and bolts of delivering stuff. Like if you really want to get into the, the nuts and bolts, then she really has. She's got a good 40 years experience in this, along with John G. But yeah, she doesn't often get the recognition, but she makes stuff happen. Legend.
Amazing, these people in our volunteer networks, or our paid campaigning and volunteer world that get things done. Right, we're going to get into some technical things, Laura, and you say, don't know. Will there be further review of the best pavements as well as the worst? So I guess seeing some pavements have been around for 180 years and haven't needed any maintenance and haven't got potholes, and then we have other ones that are very new and they're falling apart right away. So is there something we could learn about what surfaces to use on the NCN?
I don't know. It's a bit
technical. Yeah, I'm sure though.
It's a bit technical.
We've got people in this.
That's like traffic engineers, active traffic engineers cafe, I think.
Yeah, well, that's okay. We have engineers, so we'll see if we can get a presentation on the best pavement surfaces, if we've not even had one already from Mark. Hey, no, that question. I'm getting duplicates. I'm getting questions about herringbone paving, which I'm guessing goes in the same category.
That's very nice. Yes.
Yes.
I don't know what it's like in a wheelchair, but
yeah, I think if it's done to the high quality, then it's probably fine. Right, another question from H. His favorite part of NCN 7 is near Callendar. Did you use it? They restored a 1700s road and a Clapperstone bridge. So there are lots of old paths that just need a bit of volunteer labour.
I think I did. Let me look on the map at where it is. No, I didn't.
Okay, well, we didn't. Laura, I'm going to put in again. I have to do this. I have to put in some of these challenging questions. So in the start of your book, you talk about, there's this debate about whether it should be a charity building the cycle routes. So could you, for our group, share who do you think should be responsible for our national cycling and walking infrastructure?
Yeah, I think if we had a good kind of government lead on it and the funding, dedicated funding, then it should be prioritized, funded strategy should come from government. But I do see, I mean, in Scotland, Sustrans Scotland is a delivery body for the government who sets the budgets and all the, what's going to happen where. But then Sustrans, what it does really well is working with communities and doing the delivery, and it's a lot cheaper than national highways. And they know what they're doing engineering wise. I mean, you get the crappy bits just because councils say no, and then they have to negotiate, and that's why it's not that they can't do it, it's just that they're very much at the whim of councils. So yeah, I think there's still a role for Sustrans, but obviously ideally it would be run nationally and regionally, because in successful countries they local bodies get together and work together with government. And but we don't really have that structure at the moment, and we can't wave a magic wand and make it happen. But ideally, in countries where they've built networks to a high standard at pace, that's what's happened, and that's what needs to happen here.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's always a campaigner that question you have between how much should we get in and do, and the more we do, are we allowing our local authorities to get away with doing less? And is this spiraling perhaps? And do we need to go on strike and see if they improve? I don't know.
Yeah, but there's no money. There's no money, and there's no expertise, and there's no job security. There hasn't been much job security, I don't think, for people working in this field in local councils. So there just hasn't been the long-term budget. So yeah, it's no wonder that charities step in, and there's definitely an important role for charities to put pressure and to set targets and to try and get politicians and officials to kind of meet those specific targets. And I think that can be really powerful in making change. But yeah, Mark with with my book behind him says, Mark Strong said, maybe they've been too successful and not successful enough, Sustrans, because, and you could probably, it's almost like they this is me quoting Mark now, but they've like done something, and so the government can point to the National Cycle Network and say, that's done now, we've got a national cycle network.
Yeah. I think I've got the last question. So bear with me because it's a long one. So should we be emphasizing walking as the real driver of active travel investment? So there's all the benefits of walking. We know there are so many walking journeys, which I think is probably something that surprised a lot of people because of the branding National Cycling Network. Have we truly understood how much walking there is, all the benefits of walking? So should there be more emphasis on the walking side of this?
Well, I think when it comes to our target, which I can't remember if it got dropped or not, to get half of journeys by walking and cycling by 2030, the previous government's target, that most of those journeys were going to be fulfilled by walking because so many of our trips are so short and people are already walking. So yeah, I think walking is really important. It's just that, I mean, sometimes in London you see like pavements built out at junctions on the cycle lane, and then it's just as long as they're built kind of, it's not just like everyone fighting for a small, cyclists and walkers fighting for like a small space, but everyone should have, decent infrastructure. But yeah, it's really important, walking. It doesn't get, as we all know, it doesn't get the attention it deserves because it's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like a good walking holiday as much as I like a cycling holiday. Brilliant. Okay, I think we've got through all of our questions. And at the same time, we've had a really good list of new MPs and those in particular that might be good for active travel. So I hope that's helping Roger. And we've managed to get some recommendations for books that we should be sending to those new MPs, or perhaps those MPs who now have some responsibility and ability to get something done for us. So all in all, not a bad session. Laura, thank you so much. Firstly, for taking on the very, very hard task of doing lots of cycling and having lots of grand adventures. Secondly,
it was a hard job.
I bet it was at times though, when things weren't going your way. But then thank you for all the work you've done to write this book, which I think 1 is entertaining and 2 is really going to help all of us in our work. And 3, thank you for joining us today to talk all about it. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna try and find that report for you, Roger.
Yeah, I'm seeing lots of applause. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I hope it all goes really well, and that means you get to write a second book. I'm not sure if you've seen, but there's a request for you to write a book about the Netherlands and Belgium and the node system. And I've learned a lot about that while I was in Belgium, so we can trade notes. Right, so I shall wrap things up with just a quick mention of next week's speaker, provided my laptop will work with me and share the document. Excuse me, I've been caught out.
There is no laptop speaker.
Laptop says no, so I'm really sorry. But anyway, we're on until the end of July, and then we will have our summer break, remember, and see you with a new link after that. So bye, everyone, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good summer.